Wait, you're putting that inside me? The towering black woman stares in shock at the massive document the quiet cowboy places before her trembling hands. Every face at the train station had dismissed her as too much woman for frontier life, too tall, too strong, too black for any respectable arrangement. They whispered she'd end up scrubbing floors or worse, another broken soul ground down by a territory that devours the unwanted. The soft-spoken cowboy seemed like her last desperate hope for basic shelter and survival. But what he wants to place in her hands will either elevate her beyond every abandoned dream or destroy the fragile safety she's desperately sought. In a world that sees her as nothing, his secret could make her everything, if the powerful men who built this territory don't destroy them both first. Will she have the courage to accept what could save her or damn her? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The train wheezed to a stop at Denver Territory Station. Black smoke billowed across the platform as passengers stepped onto weathered wooden planks. Aurelia Blake emerged last, her 6-foot frame towering above the small crowd gathered to meet arrivals. Conversation stopped. Eyes followed her every movement. Women clutched their children closer. Men removed their hats and stared with open curiosity. "Lord Almighty," whispered the station master, "that's the biggest woman I ever seen." Aurelia clutched her worn carpet bag tighter. The letter from Samuel Drayton crumpled in her sweaty palm. 3 months of correspondence had led to this moment. A mail-order bride arrangement. Her last hope after the Chicago tenement fire took everything. She scanned the faces looking for someone to claim her. A barrel-chested man with silver whiskers stepped forward. "You the Blake woman?" His voice carried authority that made others step back. "Yes, sir, I am. Name's Jedediah Carter. I speak for most folks around these parts." His eyes traveled from her worn boots to her carefully pinned hair. "You sure you're cut out for frontier life? This ain't no place for delicate sensibilities." Heat crept up Aurelia's neck. Nothing about her had ever been called delicate. "I can work hard, sir. I've been working since I was old enough to hold a needle." Carter's laugh held no warmth. Working and surviving out here are two different things entirely. Most women your size struggle with the basics. Cooking, cleaning, keeping house proper. A soft voice interrupted from behind Carter's broad shoulders. "Excuse me." A man stepped forward. Average height, lean build, wearing simple brown trousers and a faded blue shirt. His hat sat low over kind eyes. Everything about him seemed carefully unremarkable. "Miss Blake, I'm Samuel Drayton." Relief flooded through her. This was manageable. A quiet man seeking companionship. Someone who wouldn't expect miracles. Samuel's handshake was firm but brief. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "No, sir, it was fine." Carter inserted himself between them. "Drayton, you sure about this arrangement? She's awfully big for most domestic duties, and the other considerations." His meaning hung heavy in the air. Samuel's jaw tightened slightly. "I believe I can judge what's suitable for my household. Just looking out for a fellow rancher. Some decisions can't be undone easy." "I appreciate your concern." Samuel's tone suggested the opposite. They collected Aurelia's trunk from the baggage car. The hotel owner emerged as they approached his establishment. His expression soured when he saw their group. "We don't have accommodations for her type," he announced loudly. Samuel reached into his pocket. "Double rate for one night. She needs a proper room." Money changed hands with obvious reluctance. The hotel owner pocketed the bills, but his scowl remained. Inside the general store, similar scenes played out. The clerk served them, but made his displeasure clear through sharp movements and heavy sighs. Other customers whispered behind displays of canned goods and farming supplies. Only the schoolteacher showed genuine courtesy. A woman near Aurelia's age with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome to our territory," she said simply. "I'm Clara Lynn. I teach the children here." "Thank you, ma'am. That's very kind." Clara Lynn nodded and moved on, but her small gesture felt like sunshine after a storm. That evening at the boarding house, Aurelia sat alone at a corner table. Other diners stared openly while she ate simple beans and cornbread. Conversations resumed in hushed tones around her. Samuel appeared at her table. "May I sit?" She nodded, grateful for any company. "Tomorrow we'll head to my place. It's a fair distance from town." "How far?" "About 20 miles north. We'll take the wagon." He paused. "I should prepare you. It might not be what you're expecting." Aurelia's stomach dropped, worse than she'd imagined then. A shack, probably. Maybe just a lean-to against some rocks. "I can make do with very little, Mr. Drayton. I'm not particular about comforts." Something flickered across his features. "We'll see about that." The next morning, they loaded her few belongings into a sturdy wagon. Samuel drove with steady confidence along dusty trails that wound through increasingly beautiful landscape. Rolling hills gave way to vast grasslands dotted with cattle. "Those yours?" Aurelia asked, pointing to a distant herd. "Some of them." His answers grew shorter as they traveled. Nervous energy radiated from his tense shoulders and white-knuckled grip on the reins. What was he hiding? How bad could a simple homestead be? The sun climbed higher. More cattle appeared, larger herds than she'd seen even near Chicago's stockyards. This was serious ranching country, rich land for those who could afford it. Samuel's breathing grew more labored. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Mr. Drayton, are you feeling well?" "Just anxious about showing you the place." They crested a hill. Below them spread a valley unlike anything Aurelia had ever imagined. A massive ranch house dominated the landscape. Barns and outbuildings stretched in all directions. Hundreds of cattle grazed across endless pastures. Cowboys moved among the herds like busy ants. Samuel stopped the wagon. His hands shook as he reached into his coat pocket. "Miss Blake, there's something I need to tell you. Something I need to show you." He pulled out a thick document bound with official ribbons, legal papers of some kind, far too elaborate for a simple marriage certificate. "Wait." Aurelia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You're putting that inside me." Her eyes widened as the full scope of deception became clear. This wasn't about companionship or survival. This was about something far bigger and more dangerous than she'd ever dreamed possible. Samuel's hands trembled as he unfolded the document. Official seals and legal stamps covered the heavy paper. Aurelia read the header twice before the words made sense. "Deed Transfer and Partnership Agreement. Drayton Crown Ranch. 50,000 acres. Her breath caught. "I don't understand." "I own all of this." Samuel gestured toward the sprawling ranch below. "Every building, every head of cattle, every acre of grazing land. And I want to make you my equal partner." The wagon seemed to tilt beneath her. "Equal partner?" 50% ownership, full legal rights, your name on every document. His voice grew stronger. "I didn't seek a housekeeper or a decoration, Miss Blake. I need someone strong enough to help me run an empire." Aurelia stared at the valley below. Cowboys moved cattle between pastures. Smoke rose from the main house chimney. This was more wealth than she'd imagined possible. "Why me? You don't even know me." Samuel's shoulders straightened. "My first wife was delicate, beautiful, refined, everything society said I should want." Pain flickered across his features. She lasted one winter. The isolation, the work, the harsh conditions broke her spirit before they broke her body. He folded the papers carefully. "I swore I'd never make that mistake again. I need a partner who won't shatter when life gets difficult." They rode down the hill in silence. Ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully as they passed. Their eyes lingered on Aurelia with obvious curiosity, but no hostility. The main house rose before them like a small mansion, wrap-around porch, multiple chimneys, glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. Flower beds lined the walkway despite the harsh climate. Samuel helped her down from the wagon. "I know this is overwhelming, but I read your letters carefully. You've survived loss, poverty, and starting over. Those are the qualities that matter out here." A gray-haired woman emerged from the house. Her weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "You must be Miss Blake. I'm Martha, the head of household staff. Staff. The concept felt foreign. Aurelia had always been the one cleaning and cooking for others. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. None of that ma'am business. We work together here. Martha's tone was firm but kind. Mr. Drayton said you'd want to learn the ranch operations right away. Samuel nodded. I thought we'd start with the cattle inventory tomorrow, then move to the business ledgers. Inside, the house overwhelmed her senses. Rich wood paneling, stone fireplaces, furniture that looked handcrafted by master artisans. But everything felt functional rather than showy, built for comfort and durability. That evening at dinner, more staff joined them. The foreman, head cook, and stable master treated Aurelia with careful respect. No one questioned her presence or her right to be there. The southern herd needs moving to higher pasture, reported Jim, the foreman. Weather's been too wet in the low areas. Samuel turned to Aurelia. What do you think? You worked around cattle in Chicago. All eyes focused on her. Heat crept up her neck. I only saw them at the processing plants, but standing water breeds disease. Moving them makes sense. Jim nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. We'll start the drive Monday. Later, Samuel showed her the ranch office. Maps covered the walls showing property boundaries, water sources, and grazing rotations. Ledger books lined shelves with meticulous records going back decades. This is more complex than I expected, Aurelia admitted. You'll learn quickly. Your letters showed good instincts about organization and planning. She studied the maps. How many head of cattle total? Nearly 8,000, plus horses, sheep, and some experimental breeding programs. The numbers staggered her. In Chicago, she'd sewn shirts for pennies a day. Here, Samuel discussed livestock worth more than entire city blocks. 3 days passed in a blur of learning. Aurelia absorbed information about feed schedules, breeding records, and seasonal patterns. The ranch hands warmed to her quickly after she correctly identified signs of hoof rot in a young bull. Where'd you learn that? Asked Pete, the oldest cowboy. Chicago stockyards. Sick animals meant lost wages for everyone. Samuel smiled with obvious pride. See, I told you she'd be valuable. But trouble arrived on Thursday morning. Jedediah Carter rode up with 2 other men, their faces grim with purpose. Drayton, we need to talk. Samuel stepped onto the porch. What brings you out here, Carter? Heard some concerning rumors about your new arrangement. Carter's gaze fixed on Aurelia through the window. Some folks think you might not be thinking clearly about proper business practices. My business practices are sound. Are they? Carter pulled out his own set of papers. Been looking into territorial laws about property ownership. Seems there might be some complications with your current setup. Samuel's jaw tightened. What kind of complications? The kind that could invalidate certain agreements, especially ones made hastily without proper legal consideration. Aurelia felt ice form in her stomach. She'd known this was too good to last. Men like Carter didn't let people like her have nice things. But Samuel stepped forward, his quiet demeanor hardening into something more dangerous. I've made my decisions based on merit and capability. Any man who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Carter's smile held no warmth. Oh, we intend to. Real soon. They rode away, leaving dust and unspoken threats hanging in the air. Samuel turned to Aurelia. His eyes held a mixture of determination and worry that made her chest tight. This isn't over, she said quietly. No, it's just beginning. The question is whether you're ready to fight for what we're building here. Aurelia looked out at the vast ranch spreading beneath the afternoon sun. Everything she'd never dared dream lay within reach. But powerful men wanted to take it away simply because she existed. She squared her shoulders. I've been fighting my whole life, Mr. Drayton. I'm not about to stop now. The fever hit Samuel hard on Saturday morning. Aurelia found him collapsed beside his bed, burning with temperature and shivering uncontrollably. Get Doc Harrison, she told Martha. He's in Colorado Springs treating an outbreak there. Won't be back for days. Aurelia helped Samuel back to bed. His skin felt like fire beneath her hands. Sweat soaked through his nightshirt within minutes. "The Morrison contract," he mumbled through chattering teeth. "Meeting's Monday. Can't miss it." "You're not going anywhere." 500 head. Biggest sale of the year. His eyes struggled to focus. "Without that money, we can't pay the hands through winter." Martha appeared in the doorway. "Jim's asking what to do about the cattle drive. Morrison's buyers are expecting delivery by Tuesday." Aurelia's stomach clenched. The ranch's financial survival hung on this single transaction. Samuel had explained the numbers clearly. No sale meant no winter wages. No winter wages meant losing half their workforce. "I'll handle it." Both Martha and Samuel stared at her. "You've never led a cattle drive," Samuel whispered. "No, but I've organized shipping schedules for 300 seamstresses working 12 different production lines." Aurelia's voice grew stronger. "Logistics are logistics." She spent the afternoon studying Samuel's route maps and delivery contracts. The Morrison Ranch sat 40 miles northeast through challenging terrain, canyon passes, river crossings, and several areas known for rustler activity. Jim found her in the office that evening. "Miss Blake, I respect what you're trying to do, but the boys are nervous about following someone untested." "What would convince them?" "Proof you understand cattle behavior and can make hard decisions under pressure." Aurelia nodded. "Then I'll give them proof." Sunday morning she rode out with the hands to gather the herd. 500 prime steers scattered across 2,000 acres of grazing land. The cowboys worked with practiced efficiency, but she noticed inefficiencies in their pattern. "Pete, swing wider on the eastern flank," she called. "Those strays will double back through the creek bed if you don't cut them off." Pete hesitated, then followed her suggestion. The strays moved exactly as she'd predicted. "How'd you know that?" asked Jake, the youngest cowboy. "Chicago stockyards. Same herding instincts. Different landscape." Her father's voice echoed in her memory. He'd coordinated livestock shipments for the meatpacking plants, taking her along when her mother worked late. She'd absorbed his lessons about animal psychology and group movement patterns without realizing their value. By noon, they'd successfully gathered the entire herd. The cowboys' skeptical glances had shifted to respectful attention. "We leave at dawn," Aurelia announced. "Morrison expects delivery Tuesday afternoon. That gives us margin for unexpected delays." Monday morning brought perfect weather. Clear skies, moderate temperature, light breeze from the south. The herd moved steadily through the first 10 miles without incident. But trouble found them at Devil's Canyon. The narrow pass funneled 500 cattle into a space barely wide enough for 20. Steep rock walls rose on both sides, creating natural choke points where nervous animals could easily panic. Halfway through, the lead steers stopped. Something ahead spooked them. The entire herd began backing up, pushing against the animals behind. "What's the problem?" Aurelia rode forward. Jim pointed to fresh horse tracks in the sandy ground. "Riders. Maybe 4 or 5. They've been watching us. Rustlers." Samuel had warned her about crews that preyed on isolated cattle drives. They'd position themselves at vulnerable spots and demand payment for safe passage, or simply steal whatever they could handle. "Options?" she asked. "Go around. Add 8 hours to the journey. We'd miss the deadline. Or push through and hope they don't want to fight." Aurelia studied the terrain. The canyon offered perfect ambush positions. Anyone with rifles could control the entire passage from the high ground. But something nagged at her memory. Her father's voice again, explaining how Chicago's rail yards handled bottlenecks during busy seasons. "We're approaching this wrong," she said suddenly. "We're thinking like prey instead of predators." She turned to the cowboys. "How many of you can ride hard and fast?" "All of us," Jim replied. "Why?" "Because we're not sneaking through that canyon. We're taking it." Her plan was simple but required precise timing. Split the herd into 3 groups. Send the first 100 head through at normal speed while the cowboys created a dust cloud and noise to suggest the entire herd was moving together. Meanwhile, the remaining cattle would circle back and approach from the south, using a longer but safer route. By the time any rustlers realized they'd been deceived, the main herd would be miles away. That's crazy enough to work, Pete admitted. They executed the plan flawlessly. The decoy group thundered through Devil's Canyon while Aurelia led the main herd around the southern hills. When they reunited 5 miles later, every head of cattle was accounted for. "Ma'am," Jake said with obvious admiration, "that was some smart thinking." The final river crossing tested her knowledge of cattle psychology. The water ran higher than expected from recent rains. Nervous steers refused to enter the rushing current. Aurelia remembered her father's technique for moving reluctant animals. Instead of pushing from behind, he'd use led animals to demonstrate safety. She selected the calmest bull and guided him across personally. The other cattle followed his example, crossing in orderly groups without panic or confusion. They reached Morrison's ranch with 2 hours to spare. The buyer inspected the herd with obvious satisfaction. "Prime condition, exactly what we contracted for." Money changed hands. More cash than Aurelia had ever seen in her life. On the ride home, Jim pulled his horse alongside hers. "Miss Blake, I owe you an apology and a promise." "What kind of promise?" "Any hand who questions your authority from now on answers to me personally." That evening, Aurelia sat beside Samuel's bed. His fever had broken during the night. Color had returned to his cheeks. "How did it go?" he asked weakly. She placed the payment receipt on his nightstand. Morrison was satisfied. Full payment received. Samuel's eyes widened as he read the amount. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it. This ranch belongs to both of us now." Outside, she could hear the cowboys celebrating their successful drive. For the first time since arriving, Aurelia felt like she truly belonged here. She'd proven herself through action rather than words. But Carter's threats still lingered. The legal challenges he'd promised would test more than her business skills. They'd test whether merit and competence could overcome prejudice and power. She was ready for that fight, too. Clara Lynn arrived at the ranch on Wednesday morning with her face pale and her hands shaking. She clutched a leather satchel against her chest like a shield. "I need to speak with you both immediately," she said, without preamble. Samuel, still recovering but mobile, led them into his office. Clara Lynn spread documents across his desk with trembling fingers. "I found these in Judge Morrison's files. I clean his office twice a week for extra income." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jedediah Carter has been forging land claims." The papers showed elaborate schemes dating back months, false ownership documents, backdated surveys, property assessments that contradicted official territorial records. "He's claiming prior rights to your eastern pastures," Clara Lynn continued. "Says his family held grazing contracts before you bought the land." Samuel examined the forgeries with growing anger. "These are completely fabricated. My grandfather purchased this land directly from the territorial government in 1864. Carter's convinced Judge Morrison that your marriage arrangement violates territorial property laws. He says partnerships with certain people aren't legally binding." Aurelia felt ice form in her stomach. "What does that mean exactly?" Clara Lynn's eyes filled with tears. "It means he's going to try to strip you of everything. The partnership agreement, your ownership rights, even your right to stay on the ranch." Samuel slammed his fist on the desk. "On what grounds?" "He's arguing that you weren't mentally competent when you signed the partnership, that you were influenced by grief over your first wife's death." The room fell silent. Outside, cattle lowed in the distance and cowboys called to each other during their daily work. Normal life continuing while their world threatened to collapse. "There's more," Clara Lynn said quietly. "I overheard Carter talking to his men. This isn't just about land or money." She pulled out a faded photograph. A young woman with delicate features and sad eyes posed in an elaborate dress. "Your first wife, Elizabeth. Carter was courting her before she met you, Samuel." Samuel's face went white. "Elizabeth never mentioned that." "She wouldn't have. Carter scared her, made inappropriate advances. She chose you partly to escape his attention." The pieces clicked into place. Carter's personal hatred, his determination to destroy Samuel's happiness. This was revenge disguised as legal action. "He spent the last 2 years planning this," Clara Lynn continued. Studying territorial laws, building relationships with corrupt officials, gathering ammunition to use against you. Aurelia stood and walked to the window. Her reflection stared back, superimposed over the ranch lands that had begun to feel like home. How much time do we have? The hearing is scheduled for Friday, 3 days. Can we prove the documents are forged? Clara Lynn nodded. I made copies of everything, but Carter has Judge Morrison in his pocket, and territorial law does give judges broad discretion in partnership disputes. Samuel joined Aurelia at the window. We'll fight this, hire lawyers from Denver, appeal to territorial authorities. That could take months, Aurelia said quietly, and cost more than we can afford. Then what do you suggest? She turned to face him. Something had crystallized in her mind during the successful cattle drive, an understanding of her own capabilities that went beyond survival instincts. We don't just defend ourselves. We go on the attack. That afternoon, Aurelia rode into town alone. She visited the bank, the telegraph office, and 3 different government buildings. By evening, she'd gathered information that painted a very different picture of Jedediah Carter's activities. His ranch was heavily mortgaged. He owed money to suppliers across 2 territories. More importantly, he'd been skimming profits from cattle sales that belonged to his business partners. How did you discover all this? Samuel asked when she returned. I know how to read financial records. And people talk freely around someone they don't consider a threat. The next day, they received an unexpected visitor. A tall man in an expensive suit rode up to the house on a magnificent horse. David Morrison, he introduced himself. Judge Morrison's son. Aurelia's heart sank. More bad news, probably. But David Morrison's expression held anger rather than hostility. I came to warn you. My father is being blackmailed. He explained how Carter had discovered Judge Morrison's gambling debts from trips to Colorado mining towns. The judge owed more than his annual salary to dangerous men who collected debts with violence. Carter offered to pay the debts in exchange for favorable rulings. My father was desperate enough to agree. Why are you telling us this? Samuel asked. Because what Carter is doing is wrong. And because I've heard about your partnership. He looked directly at Aurelia. The way you handled that cattle drive has people talking, impressed people. That evening, more visitors arrived. Jim Morrison, the cattle buyer, 2 neighboring ranchers, even Pete and several cowboys from their own outfit. We heard about the legal trouble, Jim Morrison said. Thought you should know you've got support. The ranchers nodded agreement. Carter's been a problem for everyone. High time someone stood up to his schemes. We'll testify on your behalf, one added, about the cattle deal, your business competence, whatever you need. Aurelia felt something she'd never experienced before, a community rallying to protect her, people who valued her contributions rather than dismissing her existence. But she also understood the stakes clearly. Carter had spent years building his case. He had corrupt officials and forged documents. Most importantly, he had the legal system's inherent biases on his side. I want to represent myself at the hearing, she announced. Everyone stared at her. Aurelia, you're not a lawyer, Samuel said gently. No, but I understand business records, and I understand what Carter is really trying to do. She'd been thinking about this since Clara Lynn's revelation. Carter expected them to fight on his terms using his rules, but she had advantages he hadn't considered. He sees me as someone who doesn't belong here, someone who should be grateful for whatever scraps she's allowed to keep. Her voice grew stronger. But I've proven my value through results. And I'm going to make sure everyone in that courtroom understands exactly what those results mean. Samuel studied her face. You have a plan. I have more than a plan. I have the truth. And sometimes that's enough. Outside, night settled over the ranch. In 3 days, everything they'd built together would face its ultimate test. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Aurelia felt genuinely confident. She'd spent her whole life being underestimated. Tomorrow, she'd turn that into her greatest weapon. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable heat. The courthouse in Denver Territory filled beyond capacity as word of the unusual case spread through the region. Ranchers, merchants, and curious townspeople packed the wooden benches. Judge Morrison entered wearing full ceremonial robes. His face appeared haggard, older than his years. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights wrestling with his compromised position. Carter sat at the plaintiff's table with two lawyers from Colorado Springs. Expensive suits, polished boots, briefcases stuffed with documents. They exuded confidence that money and connections had already decided this case. Aurelia sat beside Samuel at the defendant's table. She wore her best dress, simple but clean. Her hair was pinned back severely. She carried only a single leather folder containing the evidence she'd gathered. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison," the bailiff announced. The packed courtroom stood as one. Whispered conversations died to silence. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked against wood. "We're here to consider the case of Carter versus Drayton regarding property ownership and partnership validity." Carter's lead attorney rose immediately. "Your Honor, we're challenging an arrangement that violates both territorial law and common sense. Mr. Drayton was clearly not of sound mind when he signed over 50% of his ranch to someone completely unqualified." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Several people nodded agreement. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "territorial statutes are clear about property ownership requirements. Certain individuals lack the legal standing to hold such agreements." He spent 20 minutes presenting forged documents that supposedly proved Carter's prior claim to portions of the ranch. Survey maps, grazing contracts, territorial permits that looked official to untrained eyes. "Mr. Drayton's reckless decision has created an untenable situation. We ask the court to void this illegal partnership and restore proper ownership." Judge Morrison appeared ready to rule immediately. His hand moved toward his gavel. "Your Honor," Aurelia stood, "I request permission to represent myself and present evidence." The courtroom stirred with interest. Judge Morrison hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Young woman, this is a complex legal matter. You might be better served by qualified counsel. I understand the law, Your Honor, and I understand business records." She approached the bench and placed her folder before the judge. "May I present my case?" Judge Morrison glanced nervously at Carter, then nodded reluctantly. Aurelia turned to face the packed courtroom. Every eye focused on her. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism, a few open hostility. "Mr. Carter claims I'm unqualified to be Samuel Drayton's business partner. Let me show you my qualifications." She spread ranch ledgers across the evidence table. "These are the financial records from the 6 months before my arrival and the 6 months after." Her finger traced columns of numbers. Cattle sales increased 40%. Feed costs decreased 20% through better purchasing agreements. Overall ranch profitability improved by 60%. Carter's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, these numbers could be fabricated." "They could be," Aurelia agreed. "That's why I brought witnesses." Jim Morrison, the cattle buyer, stood. "I can verify every transaction. Miss Blake negotiated the shrewdest deals I've seen in 20 years of business." 3 neighboring ranchers rose in sequence, each testifying to Aurelia's business competence and fair dealing. "These are impressive character witnesses," Carter's lawyer countered, "but they don't address the fundamental legal issues." Aurelia smiled. She'd been waiting for this moment. "You're right. Let's discuss legal issues." She pulled out Clara Lynn's documents. "These are photocopies of the forged land claims Mr. Carter submitted as evidence." She held up 2 nearly identical surveys with different dates. "Notice how the ink color varies between the signature and the date, and how the surveyor's seal was added with a different type of wax." Judge Morrison leaned forward, studying the documents more carefully. "Furthermore," Aurelia continued, "I contacted the Territorial Archives in Colorado Springs. The real survey records show no prior claims on Drayton land by the Carter family." She produced official telegrams confirming her research. Carter's face reddened as his lawyer scrambled through his briefcase. But the most interesting discovery was Mr. Carter's financial situation. She spread bank records across the table. He owes $18,000 to various creditors. His ranch is mortgaged beyond its value. He's been embezzling from cattle sales that belong to his business partners. The courtroom erupted in surprised voices. Judge Morrison banged his gavel for order. Carter jumped to his feet. Those records are private. She had no right to obtain them. Public records, actually, Aurelia replied calmly. Available to anyone who knows how to request them properly. She faced the judge directly. Your Honor, this isn't about my qualifications or legal technicalities. This is about a desperate man using fraud to steal property that doesn't belong to him. Additionally, she continued, I believe Mr. Carter has been pressuring you to rule in his favor through inappropriate means. Judge Morrison went pale. His hands trembled slightly. David Morrison stood in the gallery. Your Honor, I have information relevant to this case. His father stared at him in horror, but couldn't prevent him from speaking. Mr. Carter has been blackmailing my father over gambling debts. He promised to pay those debts in exchange for favorable rulings. The courtroom exploded in outraged voices. Several people shouted accusations at Carter. Others demanded justice. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly, but couldn't restore order. When the noise finally subsided, he spoke in a shaky voice. In light of this evidence, I must recuse myself from this case due to conflict of interest. That won't be necessary, Aurelia said firmly. I believe you can make the right decision now that the truth is public. She gathered her documents methodically. Mr. Carter attempted to defraud the court with forged evidence. He tried to steal property through corruption and intimidation. Most importantly, he underestimated the intelligence and determination of people he considered beneath his notice. She turned to face Carter directly. You assumed I would be grateful for whatever scraps you allowed me to keep. Instead, I've proven that merit matters more than prejudice. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Morrison straightened in his chair. Some of his dignity returned as he prepared to redeem himself. Based on the evidence presented, I rule that all claims against the Drayton Partnership are without merit. The forged documents are inadmissible. Mr. Carter will face fraud charges. His gavel fell with finality. Furthermore, the Drayton Partnership Agreement is completely valid and legally binding. The courtroom erupted in cheers from their supporters. Carter stood defeated, his lawyers already packing their briefcases and distancing themselves from the scandal. Aurelia felt Samuel's hand squeeze her shoulder. She'd done more than win a legal case. She'd proven that truth, preparation, and courage could overcome even the most powerful opposition. 6 months later, Aurelia stood on the ranch house porch watching the sunrise paint the valley gold. Her hand rested on her growing belly, 5 months along and showing clearly beneath her work dress. The morning routine had become second nature. Check the weather, review the day's tasks, greet the hands as they gathered for assignments. She'd earned their complete respect through consistent competence and fair leadership. Samuel emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee. His health had fully returned, stronger than before their ordeal. The stress of hiding his wealth and worrying about partnerships had lifted completely. Jim wants to discuss expanding the southern herd, he said, settling beside her on the porch swing. Good idea. That pasture's been underutilized. She sipped her coffee, savoring the peaceful moment. The Morrison contract came through yesterday. They want to double their regular order. Word of their successful defense had spread throughout the territory. Other ranchers sought business partnerships. Cattle buyers competed for their premium livestock. What had started as a desperate mail-order arrangement had evolved into the region's most profitable operation. The school bell rang in the distance. Aurelia smiled, remembering her latest project. She'd convinced the territorial government to fund a proper schoolhouse serving all ranch families within 20 miles. Clara Lynn taught there now, her salary funded entirely by ranch contributions. Mrs. Drayton, Pete called from the yard. The new breeding bulls arrived from Colorado. Want to inspect them? Be right there. The formal address still surprised her sometimes. The Cowboys had shifted naturally from skepticism to professional respect to genuine affection. She'd become more than their boss's wife. She was their leader in her own right. At the corral, she examined the impressive animals with an expert eye. Her knowledge of cattle breeding had expanded dramatically through careful study and practical experience. These bulls would improve their herd quality for generations. "Fine specimens," she told the seller, "but I want to adjust the price based on that slight limp in the red one." 10 minutes of negotiation saved the ranch $300. The seller shook her hand with obvious respect before departing. "Ma'am," Jake approached nervously, "there's someone here to see you." A familiar figure waited by the main gate. Jedediah Carter sat hunched on an old horse, his clothes worn and his face haggard. The fraud charges had destroyed his reputation and finances. His ranch had been seized to pay debts. Aurelia walked over slowly, curious about his purpose. "Miss Blake," he said quietly. "Mrs. Drayton, I mean." "Mr. Carter, I came to ask for work." The words came out painfully. "I know cattle. I can ride fence, repair equipment, whatever you need." She studied his face, looking for traces of his former arrogance. Instead, she saw genuine desperation and something that might have been humility. "Why would I hire you after what you tried to do? Because I got nowhere else to go, and because you're better than I ever was." Several ranch hands had gathered nearby, clearly curious about this development. Samuel emerged from the barn, his expression unreadable. "You tried to destroy everything we built," Aurelia said calmly. "I did. And I was wrong." Carter's voice cracked slightly. "I let hatred and jealousy turn me into something ugly. But you proved that merit matters more than anything else." She considered her options. Turning him away would be justified and satisfying, but it wouldn't serve any larger purpose. "You can work the fence lines on the eastern boundary. Basic wages, no special treatment. Any trouble and you're gone immediately." Carter's relief was visible. "Thank you, ma'am. You won't regret this." That afternoon, Aurelia met with territorial officials about her latest initiative. A cooperative program allowing smaller ranchers to pool resources for better cattle sales and shared equipment purchases. "Mrs. Drayton," the territorial governor said, "your innovations are revolutionizing ranching practices across 3 territories. We'd like you to consider a formal advisory position. I appreciate the offer, but I prefer working directly with the people who need help." The evening brought another surprise visitor. A young black woman stepped down from the stagecoach, clutching a worn carpet bag and looking around with obvious nervousness. "Excuse me," she approached Aurelia hesitantly. "I heard there might be opportunities for someone willing to work hard." "What kind of work are you seeking?" "Anything respectable. I can read and write. I'm good with numbers. I just need a chance." Aurelia recognized herself from 2 years ago. The same mixture of hope and desperation. The same careful dignity despite difficult circumstances. "What's your name?" "Sarah Thompson, ma'am." "Sarah, I think we can find you something suitable. Do you know anything about bookkeeping?" The woman's face lit up. "Yes, ma'am. I kept records for a shipping company back east." "Then you're hired. Martha will show you to the guest quarters tonight. We'll discuss details tomorrow." Later that evening, Samuel found Aurelia in the office reviewing ranch financial statements. The numbers told a story of remarkable growth and stability. "Another stray you're taking in?" he asked with amusement. "Another person who deserves a chance to prove herself." He sat beside her, pulling out a small wooden box. "Speaking of proving yourself, I have something for you." Inside lay a custom-made branding iron. Instead of the traditional Drayton crown design, it bore intertwined initials, A and S, surrounded by decorative flourishes. "Our partnership iron," he explained, "for cattle that belong to both of us equally." She traced the metal design with her finger. "It's beautiful. You've made everything beautiful. The ranch, our future, even my understanding of what partnership really means." "So that's what you wanted to put inside me," she said with a laugh. "Your dreams, your trust, your complete faith in what we could build together." Samuel smiled. "And you made them all bigger than I ever imagined possible." Outside, the ranch settled into peaceful night sounds, cattle lowing softly in distant pastures, night birds calling from the cottonwoods, the gentle sounds of a thriving operation built on mutual respect and shared vision. Aurelia's baby kicked strongly, as if approving of the conversation. She placed Samuel's hand on her belly so he could feel the movement. "Our child will grow up seeing partnership as natural," she said, "seeing strength as something to celebrate rather than fear, just like their mother taught everyone else." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that merit transcended prejudice. But tonight, surrounded by the empire they'd built together, Aurelia finally understood what home felt like. She'd found a place where her strength was not just accepted but essential, where her intelligence was valued and her contributions recognized, where love grew from respect rather than desperation. The biggest thing Samuel had placed inside her wasn't the legal documents or the business partnership. It was the unshakable knowledge that she deserved everything good that came her way, and she'd spent every day since proving him absolutely right.